All good, thank you. Hello everybody, my name is Karen, as Richard just introduced me, and I'm a speech and language therapist. And I'm going to talk to you initially about another area which often affects people with Spinocerebellar Ataxia, and that's speech. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. If I can work out how this gadget works now, here we go. So here's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to focus on these areas. I just wanted to say at the beginning now, if you have some questions and want to ask me at the end, that's great. If you'd rather not ask a question in front of everybody else, please do come and find me either a bit later on this afternoon, or I will also be putting my contact details up at the end of this presentation, so please feel free to get in touch with me at any time. Any questions you have about speech language therapy in general, or about the SpeechAtax program, which I'm going to tell you about. So I'd love to hear from you. So my main things I'm going to cover today is this little introduction. Then I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the role of speech language therapy and what we do, and about speech and Spinocerebellar Ataxia. And then finally, as Richard said, I'm going to tell you about some current research that I'm involved in, which is really exciting. A program called SpeechAtax, and I hope you're all going to be equally excited about that and want to get on board. So I thought we'd start off with this little slide. Speech language therapists, people tend to get very confused about what we actually do, and I quite like this little cartoon. So yes, we do help people who have speech impediments like a lisp, but it's certainly not all that we do. We do, well, let me show you a little definition of everything that we do. It's a bit of a complex, long definition. But in summary, speech language therapists work not only with speech impediments, but also with speech difficulties secondary to muscle weakness and damage. Impairments, communication impairments caused by damage to the brain, difficulties with fluency, like stuttering or stammering, voice problems, and also, you may not know, but swallowing difficulties also comes under the remit of a speech and language therapist. We work with children and adults across the whole continuum of a person's life, and as well as diagnosing and treating, we also provide education to patients, their families, and other health professionals on how best to accommodate communication and swallowing problems, and importantly, to avoid communication breakdowns. I think everyone here will probably recognise how important communication is in our lives. Obviously, it's physical mobility is very important too, but if we can't communicate, we can very easily become isolated. We can't necessarily participate in the work environment or with our families and friends, and so it really does have far-reaching effects. So a little bit about speech and Spinocerebellar Ataxia. These are some of the symptoms that people with Spinocerebellar Ataxia may experience, and you may not experience any or all of these. Reduced or uncontrolled variation in pitch. So what we mean by that is that if you listen to me talking, you can probably tell that I'm not just speaking everything on one sound like that, but my voice goes up and down. So that's changing my pitch, going from a low note to a high note. That can become difficult for some people with Spinocerebellar Ataxia. Also, being able to control how loud or how softly you speak can become difficult. Some people describe that they feel like they're running out of air when they're talking, and they just can't get all the words out. So when we talk on the out-breath. We tend to take a nice deep breath, and then as we're breathing out is when we talk. And some people just feel that they're really running out of air when they're doing that. Some people report that their speech has just slowed down. It becomes a bit harder to talk generally, and it's a bit more effortful, and it's a bit slower. Even the quality of the voice can change. So the way that your voice sounds may not sound like the voice that you used to have. You might feel that your voice is a little bit hoarse, or a bit breathy, or a bit strained even. And even problems with speaking sounds can become difficult. Some people say they feel like they're stammering a bit, or they feel like their speech is coming out a little bit mumbled. So these are all quite important issues, and all of these issues will lead to reduced intelligibility. And what I mean by this word intelligibility is how clear your speech is, or more importantly, how easy it is for other people to understand you, for you to be able to get your message across. And that's what we mean by intelligibility. So in terms of a speech and language therapist and what they can do for people with Spinocerebellar Ataxia, obviously this speech difficulties, by the way, we have a bit of a fancy name for those. We call it dysarthria. So that kind of speech that we've just been describing is called dysarthric speech. So speech and language therapists can offer exercises and often, more importantly, strategies to help you to improve that speech clarity, the ease at which you can be understood. And in some cases, we can explore opportunities to use other devices to help to use your speech, to help to improve your speech. I mean, I'm talking about more technical things. If everyone has ever used text-to-voice or something like that on their phone, we're talking about that sort of thing. I just want to touch on another area that I said speech and language therapists are also often involved in. I'm only going to mention this briefly, but we do get involved in swallowing difficulties, which we call dysphagia. So I put a couple of signs up on the slide here of things that you might experience, the difficulties you might be having. You might notice that you're coughing a little bit when you're eating and drinking, or you might have noticed that you've become prone to having a few more chest infections. And all I would say is that if you are experiencing any symptoms of this kind, it's probably a good idea to speak to your GP or your primary healthcare provider and get a referral through to see a speech and language therapist. They can come and see you at home, so it's very easy, but they will just do an assessment and be able to offer you some useful recommendations on how to go forward if you are having issues around swallowing. Okay, so the strategies I talked about how to improve that speech intelligibility. One, obviously, is to take a deep breath before you speak. So if you do feel that you're running out of air, make sure you've filled up your lungs with lots of air before you start speaking. And top up as necessary. So you're taking a deep breath, you start talking, but then you feel like you're running out of air, and you're struggling to get all those words out as quickly as you can. Stop, pause, take another deep breath, and then keep going. Maybe try to think of a quick way that you can say what you want to say. Is there a shorter way to get your message across? Over-articulating sounds is something that we really focus on. And what I mean by that is purposeful articulation. So you're really thinking about the words that you're saying as you say them. You're thinking about the sounds that you need to create in those words, and that will help to make that speech a bit clearer. Slowing down is also really important. When we slow down our speech, even if your speech isn't as clear as you'd like, it gives signals to your communication partner. They can see the boundaries between the words and the boundaries between the sentences. So again, it helps to make your speech easier to be understood. Okay, so with that little bit of background, we're now going to come on to the current research that I'm involved in. Up till now, there has been quite limited evidence on the efficacy of speech treatment for people with Spinocerebellar Ataxia. However, the good news, there was a pilot trial of a speech treatment a little over a year or two ago in Australia, and this is SpeechAtax. The pilot trial was very successful, and so research has now gone on. It's being carried out worldwide, 5 cities around the world, 4 countries. Started off in Australia, in Melbourne. They're now doing research in Brisbane as well, in Paris, in France, in Tübingen, in Denmark, and now Auckland in New Zealand. And this is where I'm involved. So as Richard said, I came on board at the end of last year. I've been employed as part of the University of Auckland and the Centre for Brain Research, and we've started doing a clinical trial on SpeechAtax here. So let me just tell you a little bit more about it. So we know from the research within rehabilitation that if we have a program where you have to work hard with a lot of effort, and you have to work hard with a lot of effort, often it'll work. It'll change neural pathways in the brain, and it's more likely to work. This SpeechAtax also includes models of feedback, and again that is really important because it gives you the opportunity to monitor yourself and your speech is sounding, whether you're doing as well as you thought or better than you thought, and to make changes. So again, we know that works really well in rehabilitation of speech. There are, on each day, you are asked to complete 7 exercises. In fact, there's 8 exercises from day 16 onwards to the last week. So the exercises are, the first 3 are vocal control exercises. The first one, you're asked to produce a long vowel. You can see here that the bit that's behind the little box here, the main part of the screen, that's what your Samsung tablet would look like on day 19, that looks like we're on here of the treatment. And you're doing the first exercise of the day, which is the long vowel. And it tells you, say the vowel R in a stable and clear voice for as long as good vocal quality is maintained. So basically, you're going to take your deep breath and you're going to go ah for as long as you can. That's what you'll do. You're asked to do that 10 times. You can see here that this person, they've done 4 out of the 10 of that exercise. All right. Now, you've also got visual feedback. I can't show this very well from this slide, but above the line where it says stop, the grey line above that, when you're actually doing this on your tablet, that will light up in colours, and you'll be able to see the representation of your speech in terms of, it'll light up to show you that it's actually coming up and you're making sound. So if you don't see anything there, you know you've got to be a bit louder, all right? So that is a really good visual feedback. The other exercises, so the long vowel is the first one. You're then asked to do a loudness glide, so going from a very quiet ah up to a loud ah and back again, and a pitch glide, so going from a very low note up to a high note and back again. And then the next 4 exercises each day are focusing on placing stress in the appropriate part of the sentence, practicing your articulation, that you're saying words well, reading aloud and answering a daily question, all of which are focusing on the clarity of your speech or intelligibility, and also the naturalness, the way that you can speak in as natural and easy to understand way as possible. This slide shows you a little bit more about the visual feedback, the biofeedback as we call it in the SpeechAtax. So again, when you come to do your exercise, you can see from the top display there, each exercise that you do, you actually listen to your recording from the previous day. So if you're doing the long vowel, as in the exercise that it shows you here, you hit the replay button and you can hear how well you did yesterday. And you can think, okay, well, it wasn't quite as long as I thought it was. Maybe I can do a bit longer today. And then you do your production today. So you're getting that constant feedback the whole time. As I said, the feedback is really important for self-monitoring. You can have a think about what went well for you that day, what perhaps didn't go quite so well, and you can set your own goals for when you sit down to do the therapy the next time. I should add that although you're doing all this therapy at home by yourselves, you will get support of a speech language therapist, in this case me, who keeps you on track hopefully and helps you sort out any problems. So while you're doing the treatment, I touch base with the participants once a week, and we talk about how things are going. I have the opportunity to listen to the recordings, and I can say, you know that exercise there, have you tried perhaps doing it this way? You might find it easier, or we can talk about things that are tricky and things that are going well. So though you're doing it at home, you're not doing it entirely by yourself. You are getting interaction and feedback with me whenever you need it. Some more feedback that you get as you're going along are these graphs. So you're getting immediate and objective performance of how well you're doing. So these graphs compare your current performance with a previous state's performance. So for example, if you look at the 3 graphs here, you've got one for duration, which obviously that's important for when you're doing those long R's. You want to see how long you're able to do that for. And you can see in the first graph, the one on the left, you can see that this person has done better today than they did on the previous time. They've managed to go a bit longer with their R, so you're getting that immediate feedback again. The next 2 graphs are volume variation and pitch variation, and both of those are important for different tasks as well. Alright, so you're getting feedback all the time. So, obviously, as we've said, the most important measure for this is improving the intelligibility of speech. But we're also looking at things like how does it affect your voice quality? How does it affect the naturalness of your speech? How does it affect how you feel about your speech? And that I think is really important as well. So we do ask you to fill in a questionnaire before you start therapy, and then at different points through therapy and afterwards, to see how you feel about your speech, and has your own perception of how your speech sounded got improved. I mean, that's important too, if nothing else, than for confidence. It's really important. We're really hoping that this clinical trial will inform speech therapy services going forward. So we're hoping it's going to be a positive outcome, and we're hoping that it will very quickly translate into clinical practice, and this will become quite groundbreaking for people with spinocerebellar and other hereditary ataxias. So, final slide. We need some more participants, please. We're particularly interested in people who have spinocerebellar ataxia types 1, 2, 3 and 6. And as promised, my contact details are up here on the screen, and I think I'm going to be filing a copy of my slides if anybody wants them too. So please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Yes?
Just wondering if you need people, would it be best for the study for it to be people that have got the symptoms and are having trouble speaking? Or do you want people on the range?
I think it's probably important for people who've got some speech difficulties already, because otherwise we're not going to be able to show any improvement really. If people feel that speech is not a problem at all, then it's probably not going to show anything. So yeah, probably some, but it only needs to be mild. Yes.
Have you seen, similar to the study that was done with the exercise, that after it ends, what sort of effect does it have after that? Have you done any?
Well, as I said, the research is still ongoing. Nothing's been published yet. The initial trial was positive, but what we are actually doing as a part of this trial is there is a maintenance phase. So you finish your 20 days, but you still get to keep the tablet for another month, and you can carry on doing the exercises. We recommend probably about 3 times a week you carry on, and so we're going to be able to see if those effects are maintained. Yeah.
I don't live in Auckland,
Okay.
so how would that work?
All right. So we are probably, because you do need to come here for your initial visit. Probably it does need to be people in Auckland. It's going to be a lot easier, but it's something we can certainly talk about. We'll chat about that later if you want to. Yeah.
Considering that you've just heard that ongoing, repetitive, intense
Yeah.
training
Yeah.
will maintain
Yeah. Absolutely.
after we've finished all of the trials, if we find that it's working really well and it's helping, are we able to access the apps done on a phone or access anything that we can
I don't believe the app's available at the moment. Obviously, the hope would be that it will be in the future, but I understand that we can offer you paper-based, the equivalent of paper-based, so that you can carry on using it at home. Yeah.
Very good, thank you.